We're here with Rico Zuck. If you'd like to give a brief introduction to yourself.
Yeah, I'm Rico Zook. I do permaculture, and that's sort of the toolbox I carry around. And I work mostly in India as the country I've done the most work in the last 14 years. However, I've done quite a bit of work in Cambodia and some in Thailand, Laos, Indonesia, and I'm starting to work in Spain now, and hopefully some other parts of Europe, and of course the U.S. to some degree, and that's hopefully going to start up somewhere else. I do a lot of private trainings, public trainings that are open to people just to register and such. I also work with NGOs doing training of farmers, but also training of trainers and assisting with projects and their project work. And then I also do private client work, consultations or designs. People hire me for their development or homestead or whatever it is.
And for anyone who doesn't have full clarity over what is meant by permaculture,
Yeah,
how would you define it?
my simplified explanation of it is that it's a designed system to create regenerative human habitats. So it's first and foremost a design system like architecture engineering, and that it's focused on regenerative systems, which are mostly, and permaculture came out of land-based systems, but it's now actively being used in there's a thing called social permaculture, and in a lot of urban settings. And two of my instructors were money managers, and they were using permaculture as a management strategy.
You mentioned a moment ago working sometimes with NGOs.
Yeah.
What sort of form does a permaculture project take? Is an NGO?
Well,
What types of NGOs, in fact?
yeah, well, most commonly it is NGOs that are working with farmers. I mean, that's classic and typical, and by far the most widely applied use of permaculture is on farms and in agriculture or other similar land-based land management systems. I've done a couple restoration projects myself. In terms of NGO work, that's the most common, and NGOs that are working with farmers or in that communities that are farmers. They might be doing other things. However, there are, and I have worked with NGOs that we use permaculture in the way we structure programs, in the way we design the program itself, or the whole organization itself. There's an NGO I've worked with for 14 years up in Darjeeling, and we definitely have an integrated approach to all their projects, or their own work, where they have different projects, but the way in which they organize their organization and manage it is very permacultural. So if you see there's several layers, and that their organization is permaculture, and that permaculture is also applied in structuring the projects, and then the permaculture is also taught to farmers as a methodology for increasing production, and economic security, while at the same time taking care of the land and helping them manifest a strong, resilient farm itself. With organics, permaculture it's an ethically based system. That's one thing that distinguishes permaculture from other forms of design.
So obviously every site is different.
And culture.
And culture, which
Yeah,
is where I
humans.
was going
Yeah.
with it. So I was wondering if there are traits that you've found in the different countries you've worked in Asia particularly, if you find that there's something that maybe happens more in India, something that maybe happens more in Cambodia.
Well, there definitely are patterns to culture, but you started off sort of asking similar, didn't you? And to me, when I heard you, that's maybe a little clarity with the question, because at first I was thinking like the commonalities or similarities between different situations, which there is a human pattern. All humans are the same. We have different cultures, but underneath, there's a lot of commonalities, and that's sort of more on a patterning or deeper human sort of psyche and body level. And then as you get down to details or get down more into the specific culture, then you get some more and more variations as you get down into the influences of climate, influences of history, and things like that.
What have you found similar within cultures here
Yeah.
that you wouldn't have found in the States, for instance?
So what is the similarity in cultures in Asia between the different cultures of Asia that are sort of different from the cultures of the United States or European cultures?
Potentially that, and then also are there set things that you find only in India, certain things that you find only in Cambodia?
Yeah, in some ways, that's a bit of a challenging question because then it gets a lot into, in terms of my own perceptions and
Mm.
my own sort of assessment and judgments. And often it's you have to be real careful in making those generalities of details. You know what I mean? Where I'm much more comfortable making generalities and patterns and generalities much up on another layer, which once we get into detail. So to me, well, let me put it this way, and this is just like India and the United States because I'm American, so going back and forth. And my culture shock is always more going back to the United States than it is coming to India. That's always a more challenging transition. I'm more comfortable with it now, but the first 4 or 5 years, it was definitely a lot more. Each time I went back to the States, there was one particular point that really stood out to me, sort of the theme of my shock. And one of the ways I sort of describe the differences to people is that in India, everything is visible. They don't hide anything, and it's right in your face in a way. Or in the United States, and to some degree Europe, the West, everything is hidden, more and more hidden. Like a lot of our piping and the wiring and all that stuff, and old people and death and sickness and all that is hidden away. Hospitals underground, sort of the trash is buried and all that. Where here, you see people. Literally, sometimes I've seen some people on the street where I'm just wondering if they're alive. And you see, people living on the streets with the poverty, and then you see, wires. You guys have seen it too, where it's just like, and I've gone where instead of one main line going to a house, you have, everyone has their own little pipe that's going to the source. So you have 50 pipes all clustered together, and wires, just crazy wires. So that's one of the main general detail differences, is that in the West, we tend to hide everything, and in India, we tend to be in your face. And while there's positive and negatives to both, and sometimes because growing up in the West and being in the West, not really coming to India until my 40s, that was an adjustment for me, and it's still challenging at times, but I very much appreciate that. Even if I have a hard time, at least I see it. And that's one of my things that I teach. And it's like we have to know where we're at. And while the truth might be challenging, at least we know it then. We have the opportunity, as opposed to that's a truth I don't want to see. Then we're disempowered when we don't see it. In India, there's very minimal privacy to some degree. In the West, we're very private. More Puritan type. The West, American particularly, the Protestant Puritan type private, and sort of held back. In India, it's common. If we were out on the street having this conversation, there might be some Indian who got curious, and they just walk up and they basically fill this gap between us, and their head would be right there, and they'd just be, looking at us and sort of curious and like that. So and that's not rude. A lot of times when Westerners come, they bring their assumptions to India, and someone would do that, and they say you're being rude, but to them it's not. We're imposing our Western culture on them. To me, I think we should always accept the norms of the culture as long as that norm is not something that's really disempowering or abusive to other humans, because not all traditions and not all practices of a culture would I agree with in terms on a fundamental human decency level.
What are the biggest challenges?
Um, the sense of entitlement, and that's also here, we're in Goa and such, and when I see foreigners here and they have like, oh, I really, when I first was coming here, I really realized how subtle and how sort of embedded in certain ways this sense of entitlement is. And also, so that's hard. Plus, the acceptance of a high level of privilege that is really not appropriate, in terms of the work I do and such. We're very aware of, and it's all about how we live on the planet and trying to live on the planet in a way that doesn't lessen its ability to support all life, and particularly or including human life. And having a good human culture and a healthy human culture is intimately linked to the health of our planet. And so, in looking at that in the West, I guess in America, I guess if everybody lived like the Americans lived, we'd need 5 planets. In Europe, it's a little better. It's something like 3 planets or 2.5 planets if you're European. So that sort of unawareness, or just like, no, it's my right to have this. It's like, that type of stuff, which is entitlement, but it's also sort of delusion. It's also sort of you know, it's like not everybody can live like an American, and Americans can't live like America. And for us to survive, then the West is going to have to give up a hell of a lot more and adjust a hell of a lot more than someone in, say, India, which is, I think, in a lot of figures, is about just at one planet level right now, although they're pushing past that to the multiple planet level in terms of that figure.
Do you think this is a lack of awareness? Do you think people don't know this, or do you think they choose not to?
Oh, well, it depends again on the person, but it's both. It's a lot of people just don't know. Also, but in the West, it's kind of getting hard not to know. With all the information out there, climate change and all this, it's readily available. I also um, believe that the dominant paradigm or the dominant sort of contemporary, um, like the government and transnationals and all that, don't wish people to know. They don't allow and don't really talk about it because if Americans consume less, that's bad for business. And the whole imperative of capitalism is consumption. So that's it's again, it's one of those things that's fairly nuanced and fairly layered in that there's several layers involved. So it's not a thing. But yeah, I think one, they don't know, and I think a lot of people don't want to know because that means they'll have to change their life in a way that is usually less consumptive.
Do you think the message is going to get through eventually? We see Trump having been voted in as a climate change denier, and I'm sure wouldn't question the value of
Well,
consumerism
let
to
me put
power.
it this way: if we don't get it through to ourselves, the planet will. That we're already seeing sort of shifts in planetary systems. And the climate is probably one of the most complex, if not the most complex, sort of planetary-wide system in the world. Because it's a global climatic system, hugely complex, hugely massive, and yet we're starting to push it.
Someone who's travelling around the world maybe sees the idea of permaculture and thinks, "What? I can't do anything. I haven't got a garden. I'm on the move." Is there anything that they can do?
Well, yeah, and in some ways, permaculture is just one approach. So in some ways, let's just how can we travel? How can we be when we travel, how can we minimize negative impacts on our planet? And I would also include culture because permaculture is all about the earth and care of earth, but also care for people. Um, the big one, and it's the big sort of contradiction of my work, is that the most environmentally impactful form of travel is air flight. It's the jets and stuff because they're high in the atmosphere and sort of diluting all these toxins. Very like, if you wanted to get greenhouse gases and have the most impact with greenhouse gases, you put them high in the sky and sort of disperse them across the whole sky. And that's basically what jets do. So one of the things I've done in my life is that I will only travel by jet when there's no other alternative. So I would say that the first thing to do is always travel overland or over ocean if you always have that option, even if it means a bit more money, even if it means a bit more time. That's the biggest thing you can do is reduce the amount of air travel you do. That's highly impactful. You can choose to do credits. Some airlines have carbon credits you can purchase for extra money, but that's a very sort of like it's what programs they use, and how the money is really spent on the project if it's really helpful. The the simplest, most direct way is just not to friggin' release the carbon to begin with. Consume less. That's just the biggest thing, and that's no matter if you're traveling or not. But you can do that in traveling too. It's just consume less, and again, it's not. It's like if we don't use it, then it's less impactful, as opposed to, there's this whole thing about I've gone to green fairs and made myself kind of a pain in the ass by often asking these people who are selling all these green products if they think that we can consume our way to sustainability. And there is a lot of discussion about that. And so I would say the second step is just to consume less.
Mm-hmm.
And then also be aware of what you're consuming. In India, as you go, you see all these little candies in packets and little treats in pack. And I'll in some ways, oh, I'm a little hungry, I'd like a snack, but I won't buy it. I really deny myself a lot because it's just like, sure, I'll have my little piece of candy, that's nice, I'm happy for a minute, but then there's this friggin' piece of plastic now that's now the rest of its life. It's just like, where's it going? What's it doing? Plastic doesn't decompose. So I would also say that when you're traveling to always support local, this gets a little bit more. I think a lot of with travel, once you get past sort of the jet flights, and then level of physical consumption in terms of products and stuff as you're traveling, that a lot of it gets more into the cultural impacts locally. You know, support local businesses, support the local, you know, the local thing. So if you're in India, don't freaking go to McDonald's. Don't go to KFC. You know, every so often I've done it. Every so often I'm veg, but there'll be sometimes I'll, you know, I won't mention it, but it's a sandwich shop that's all over the world. You know, yeah, we know what it is. And every so often I'm tired, this and that, and I'll just go grab one of those and take it home. But that's like 2 times a year, you know. So, and I feel definitely some level of guilt when I do it. And also be aware that tourism has, and often is done as an extractive industry. You know, it's like take photos, take images, take memories, and you go home. And there's not this sort of giving to the culture. And just be aware of how much you're trying to extract in what form. You know, like, oh, can I take your picture, and this and that, and all your memories, and what are you really giving back to the culture? And so look for opportunities to interact with locals on an equitable level, on a human to human level, where there's not, and it occurs on the other side too, like here in Goa to some degree and other places where the locals are also looking to you like, oh, you're an ATM machine, you know, like all foreigners are wealthy. It's you know, it goes both ways. And so look for opportunities by which you can connect with where the culture you're in on an equitable level as human to human. And there's not this, you know, I'm a tourist and you're here and, you know, I'm taking your photo and I'm trying to figure out how you can get some money from me. You know, let's try to, you know, have some type of, you know, just person to person contact and interchange.
Okay, so supporting local business, supporting local people, how does begging fit in with this picture?
A bit challenging, but like everything, it's contextual. And that's a great question for India. I mean, it happens other places, but India in particular. Um, the thing to understand is sort of consider who's begging and why are they begging. Uh, there's a general thing is like I never give money to children. That's just one of the big ones because I've had a close friend, family type member who I've become real close to, who has worked with street children, and parents will often keep children out of school or do that because they can get good money that way, and so the child is sort of, you know, with children, it's often their schooling is begging, and you know their parents, you know, that's like the children are their source of income by getting the children out there and such. And so if a child comes up to me, if I'm able to, I always tell them to go in school. It's not always a fair thing to say to them, but you know, in a lot of cases it is, and it's like, so I never give money to children.
Okay, so permaculture is relatively new. It's been around for a while, but it's quite a new thing.
Yeah, about 35 plus years now.
Who impresses you at the moment in
Well,
permaculture?
first I'm going to give a shout out, and may he rest in peace, is Toby Hemingway from the U.S. You know, he just passed about 2-3 months ago, and he wrote Gaia's Garden, the most widely read, you know, most popular. And I think it was the 5th most purchased garden book in the U.S. Jude Hobbs, another. I'm from the U.S., so that's sort of, you know, a fair bit in the numbers. Jude Hobbs is my mentor, Cascadia Permaculture. Great lady. In terms of the wider world, I don't know him. Oh, come on. Darren Doherty is a pretty well-known, pretty top-level permaculturalist from Australia. I have to give a shout out to my buddies in PDI and my own plug, Permaculture Design International Business. We started together, but I really just really appreciate Andrew Millison, Jeremiah Kidd, Lauren Lundijk. I'm saying his name wrong. Sorry there. Lauren and Neil Bertrand, and then there's Corrine and Jenny Pell. They're all part of this group, so you know they're my contemporaries and colleagues when we started this business. So I really respect and appreciate them. Yeah, Rosemary Morrow. I wanted to put a shout. She's another Australian lady, first generation, and she's doing a lot of work with refugees. You know, which is one of the growing issues of our planet. We have several of them, but the refugee and what happened here and stuff. And so they're currently now developing whole approaches and stuff for refugee camps and stuff like that. So in terms of general about permaculture, is there is a pretty strong female presence within the people doing it.
Do you think more women in positions of power in general in the world would be a powerful change?
Yes. Nothing more to add to that. And often, well, and as a strategy, if you're going into the community, it's very strategic to have the women on your side. And if you want to get things done, get the women in the community on your side, and you'll have a lot more success.
If money weren't an issue and you had complete freedom to have the size and shape of land that you need anywhere in the world, where would you choose to set up?
Well, when I am talking, and we're going to do this in class coming up, when we talk about climates and just the various, the different types of way we sort of categorize the various climates on the planet, to me, the ideal for production and just ease of living would be right warm temperate or subtropical. As you get more tropical, there's certain things that come up that are a bit more challenging. When you get cold temperate, definitely, with the winters and stuff, get more challenging. For me, and I just have purchased land, it's Hawaii. So if you're asking me personally, then when I was looking for land, I chose the States just because it'd be easy.
Mm.
I'm a citizen, and the process is fairly easy in terms of, it's a pretty straightforward process if you have the money. We got very, very blessed to find a very, nice little piece of land, very remote on Molokai in Hawaii. So that's pretty ideal for me. If I hadn't purchased there, I was looking, I really like, personally, again, it's personal, fond of Spain.
Okay, so a two-part question here.
Okay.
How can permaculture save the world, and is it going to?
Okay, so remind me about the second part because the first one. First off, I want to say that saving the world's not the point. We're not going to hurt the world. I mean, we can shift it around, but we're not going to kill the world. We're not killing the world. The world will survive. The challenge, the issue, is will the planet be able to support human life? Are we going to push the planet to such a degree that we as humans have to really struggle to survive and have massive die-offs because it's so challenging and all that? Yeah, I mean, if one wanted to follow permaculture, yeah, I'm sure it can. I have no doubt about it. See, one of my biggest frustrations about our planet now, and deals with the second part of the question, is that I totally believe, that we can address and successfully deal with all the challenges we're currently facing on our planet now with off-the-shelf technology and with our knowledge base. We don't have to know anything more, and we don't have to invent anything new. Because yeah, we can deal with it all. So why aren't we dealing with it? Because of friggin' humans. Because of friggin' humans. And are we going to do it? I have no friggin' idea. And in some ways, to me, it's not, because trying not to get too woo-woo spiritual on you or anything, and I'm not in the right context. I'm happy to talk that level with people. But for me personally, I don't believe this is the ultimate reality. I think there's a lot more going on within the context of what is life and what's beyond life after, all those things. So to me, in certain ways, I think it's important we have to address it. So we have responsibility being, physically manifested in this reality on the planet. We have responsibility as thinking humans on the planet. And at the same time, in some ways, I don't think the ultimate issue is what actually happens. The ultimate issue is what are you doing now and how do you act in this moment. It's the process, and that's permaculture is a lot about process. We have goals, and we're trying to create specific outcomes. However, we focus on the process to create those outcomes. If things continue as they are now, then something's going to shift. There will be some type of shift, and if we don't consciously think about things, and if we don't consciously start changing these things that are impacting the planet, that are impacting massive numbers of people, then we will have a collapse of some form. The question is, when will it happen, and what will happen when it happens? Take a step. That worked great. Now take another step. We'll get there when we get there.
Do you think overall there is more optimism or there is more pessimism?
That gets into my thing where it's like, am I an optimistic pessimist, or am I a pessimistic optimist? That's a question I've been, for myself, trying to figure out which one of those am I. And in a film, I've been watching some documentaries on different things and this and that. I wish I can remember who said this. It takes me a bit, but someone said in one of these recent ones that they're a long-term optimist but a short-term pessimist, and that sort of resonated with me. I'm great.
Rico Zook, thank you very much indeed for the interview.
My pleasure.
See you on the road.
Yeah, and if anybody out there wants to, hang out with me, come see a course. I'm putting my product placement plug here. Look at ipermaculture.org. See my schedule, and I'd love to meet some people out there. I'm happy to help them understand how they can, live in a better way on the planet.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.